I used to play a lot of video games. And if you ask my wife, I still do. But there is a difference between playing games and playing games. So when I was younger, I had all the time in the world, right? And I could bounce from one game to another. I could spend hours running around trying to save Princess Zelda and the citizens of Hyrule, using the Master Sword to travel through time, and using the ocarina to solve puzzles. And then I could switch gears entirely and play through Kingdom Hearts, an unnecessarily convoluted game about light versus dark, which mashes up elements of magic, Arthurian tales, steampunk aesthetics, Japanese mythology, and of course, the wonderful world of Disney. I'm not kidding. You play through this entire game battling minions who have been unleashed from the realms of darkness. And you ultimately succeed because you have Donald and Goofy by your side. The power of friendship always wins. Now, I just don't have that kind of time to play video games. But when I do play games, I end up choosing the same few titles that I can be done with in about 20 minutes. Just quick online multiplayer games, playing with absolute strangers on the internet that I don't feel any connection towards the games or the people I'm playing with. And these strangers, many of them disconnect from the game the second it starts. And then you're down like one or two players for the rest of the match. And then you're sitting there slogging through until time is up. And you're thinking, why am I even doing this? Is this even fun? What is the meaning of life? I used to have time and energy to play through and then replay games that took 80+ hours to complete. And that is not including the side missions, the secret bosses, unlocking every possible ending, collecting every ultimate weapon for all my characters. In the business, we call that 100%ing a game. Now, though, there's a new game that we all play, where we just try to get to 0. 9. 9 is the number of unread emails I currently have in my inbox. Thank you. Thank you. Getting to 0 unread emails might just be the most Sisyphean task of our time. We take that number down. We respond to every message that comes in. We feel that sense of accomplishment when we see that beautiful goose egg. And so we walk away from the computer. But then our phone dings. I mean, look. Another temple newsletter. But seriously, look at those. Those are very important. But even without these external messages coming in, I personally add to my own anxieties about the unread email count. For years, my only way of creating to-do lists was emailing myself. Reminders. Reach out to so-and-so about X, Y, and Z. Add info to the B'nai Mitzvah page on the website. Follow up about. Cancel subscriptions to. And I would leave these emails as unread until I finally completed the task. This summer, I finally completed one of those tasks. I got around to one of those unread emails that has been sitting in my email inbox since 2013. 10 years ago, when I was the young, naive youth director here at TIOH, I thought to myself, you know what would make an amazing high holiday read? Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. I loved what I read of it in high school, and I thought that it would be such a powerful way to connect to the divine via nature during a deeply reflective season. So I checked it out from the library. I put it by my bedside table. I wrote emails to myself to remember to read the book. And then I never got around to reading it. Probably because I was playing video games. But when the high holidays came and went that year, I sadly returned it to the library. And it's been on my mind ever since. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Calvin, come on. Why didn't you just go back to the library and check it out and then read it? Well, if we're being honest, I didn't have the time. I've been busy. I went to rabbinical school. I lived in Israel for a year. I got married. I graduated from rabbinical school during the lockdown. I started life as a virtual rabbi. I then transformed into an in-person rabbi with a bottom half. I had a child. That child just started school here last week. But as we entered this summer, I knew that I was going to be talking about tackling the backlog for my high holiday sermon. And so I made it a point to go out of my way to check out that book from the library, Leaves of Grass, and finally read it. And I had the perfect opportunity to do so. I was going away back east for a week-long retreat at a campsite, in the woods, on a lake. I mean, exactly how Walt would want me to read his poetry. And so here I am, standing before you, and I can proudly say two things. One, I have finally read Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Thank you. Thank you. I deleted that email reminder to myself, and I crossed it off my to-do list. Two, something shifted inside of me when I read those final words of Leaves of Grass, and I closed that book. So much so that I was almost charged a late fee for not wanting to return it. And I was sitting there, and it dawned on me. I finally read it. And sure, the words were profound. And I'll actually be peppering in a lot of what I gleaned from Walt's poetry throughout these holidays. But there was a feeling inside of me of finishing something that I had intentionally set aside to accomplish. I felt myself getting closer to zero. That elusive state of productivity, pride, and progress. Now, I know there's still so much for me to tackle in terms of my own backlog, movies I want to watch, books I want to read, games I want to play, places I want to visit. I know the emails are going to keep coming in. And these unread notifications, the notes that we leave to ourselves, these to-do lists, these are all accountings of tasks that require our attention and perhaps even our action to complete. And realistically, we know that we can't accomplish everything, and we don't want to either, because then what will we be doing with our time? What we do want, though, is to figure out a way to make each of these tasks manageable so that we feel better prepared for what's to come that will also require our attention. Earlier this summer, Rabbi Mari invited our community to finish the sentence, "Before I die." And some of those responses in the form of artwork and some chalkboard handwritten answers are going to be on display throughout our building during these next 10 days. This prompt, though, is the underlying theme of this season. Our tradition even teaches that Yom Kippur is a rehearsal for our own death, which is why we have certain practices of fasting, guidelines as to the clothes we can and cannot wear, activities from which we should refrain. And for the next 10 days, we gather as community, and we offer traditional prayers and reflections that evoke grand imagery from our God, judging us for our backlog of shortcomings from this past year. It seems easy to say that, yeah, okay, we get it. The metaphors, it's a fresh start, blank slate, yada, yada. And what if we took a few steps back to take in what this season offers us? What if we stood in awe, even in a little bit of fear, of these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe? Rabbi Eliezer taught his students that the day before you die, you should work to restore that which is broken. The students asked, but how does one know the day they are going to die? And the rabbi responded, exactly. You could die tomorrow, which is why you should act now to repair that brokenness, which will allow you to live in such a state of consistent and constant cycles of the restorative work of tshuva. What might it feel like to acknowledge everything from this past year that brought us further away from zero? How would it sound to truly apologize to those whom we have harmed? In a week's time, we are going to be chanting Kol Nidre, admitting that we're going to make more mistakes, that those to-do lists are going to grow longer. What if we gave ourselves permission to take our words in these Machzor seriously? What if we gave ourselves permission to believe that our prayers matter? What if this year we accepted the invitation to hit the button on the spiritual reset, to use this season as a chance to get to zero, to tackle the backlog of less than ideal interactions and the ways in which those experiences fractured our souls? Just this week, I got even closer to zero. I began reading another book from my backlog called Day Tripper. It's a graphic novel that follows the writer of obituaries for a local Brazilian newspaper. And each segment of its 10 short parts highlights a different time in the protagonist's life. And every episode ends with a different version of him dying. And then it's sealed with a 1 to 2 line obituary that he would have written himself. And I haven't finished it yet, but 2 things have already jumped out at me. The first is that the emotional and spiritual nuance of one's life is greatly reduced when told in just a few words. The second is that time is ever present, relentless. And Day Tripper asks us, how often do we ponder the past, wish for the future, but exist foremost in the experience? Rabbi Hillel taught, do not separate yourself from your community. Do not be sure about yourself until the day you die. Do not judge your peer until you have stood in their place. Do not say anything that cannot be immediately understood in the hopes that it will eventually be understood. And do not say that I will study when I have the time, because you may never have that time. So much of what we don't control will continue to come in, requiring our energy and attention, pulling us further away from zero. For what little we can control, with the time that we have left, let's choose to fill our souls with goodness. Lean into our passions, engage in activities that bring us joy, surround ourselves with people we love and who love us. What better place than here? What better time than now? May this be a year we get to zero so that we can 100% life.